In the distortion world, Goku relied on his immense arm strength to tightly cling onto an enraged Giratina's body. Growing more annoyed by Goku's attempt to free Vegeta from its mouth, said Pokémon contorts about in pure agony and flies around its home dimension at unprecedented speeds. It frustratedly crashes into various landmasses back first, hoping to throw the Saiyan prodigy off through means of pain infliction. Due to his highly durable skin, the destroyed scraps of soil were merely minor nuisances to Goku, and he blankly shook some excess dirt samples out of his messy hair. Tinraha! Giratina screeched irritably, unleashing a barrage of multiple air torrents in maddened succession that just barely brushed past Vegeta's head. Each blast of wind hits different areas of the distortion world, creating portals that lead to different areas of the Pokémon world and alternate universes entirely. With this simultaneous production of whirling currents, the zero-gravitated Dragon Balls are sucked into their own respective portals and vanish upon entry. The Peel-Off gang, floating in wide-eyed bewilderment, gape at this misfortunate anomaly and pounce onto the 4-star ball in desperation to at least salvage one of their lost treasures. "Oh no, you don't! The Dragon Balls are mine and mine Aluaha," Emperor Peel-Off seethed determinedly before being dragged into another projected black hole once more, wailing like a little girl mid-transition. "Suri!" Shu and Mai screamed fearfully, also descending into the prevailing bottomless void as they grabbed onto their boss's feet. As their personal gateway out of the distortion world ceased to be, Giratina produced one last reality-warping blast that flung the unconscious Vegeta out of its maw and created a final rift. Seeing as his arms were steadily shrinking by the second, Goku bounces off of Giratina's back and rockets down towards the Saiyan Prince. "I got you," Goku proclaimed assuredly, hugging his arms around Vegeta's stomach area. Unable to slow the speed of his fall, Goku shuts both eyes tightly in uneasiness and enters the abnormal exit into parts unknown. Giratina carefully watches the two Universe 7 interlopers as they disappear, relieved that the Dragon Ball's bothersome output of energy was no longer an issue for now. Giratina warbled in a much calmer tone, nodding pleasurably as it took flight to deeper parts of its arguably hellish territory. On Kami's Lookout, it was a usual day on Kami's Lookout, an elevated pavilion constructed above Korin's tower and the eponymous land of Korin itself. There, the black-skinned genie, Mr. Popo, practiced his annual routine of watering the flowers while Piccolo meditated near the semicircular plaza's furthest edge. Said Namekian martial artist wore a white turban and caped cloak combo, sporting large elfin ears that complemented his green skin. He sat in a calm, meditative position, floating above ground due to the subconscious use of his inner ki. Closer to the Lookout's palace stood Dend, Earth's current guardian and a much younger specimen of Piccolo's predominantly slug-like species. He is clothed in both a maroon vest and ruffled white robes, his 2 feet covered by the same orange shoes as Piccolo Daimao's reincarnation. Suddenly stricken with a crippling sense of dread, Dend drops his wooden staff to the ground and clutches his heart painfully. Much to Mr. Popo's horror, the youthful Namekian collapses to his knees from inexplicable exhaustion. "Dend, what's wrong?" the immortal assistant of Kami questioned concernedly, helping the distressed extraterrestrial being to his feet. Dend's eyes were widened in shock as he struggled to breath. The Dragon Balls, they've disappeared somehow," Dend gasped in grief-stricken confusion, literally feeling as if a part of him was mysteriously crushed from within. Piccolo put his meditation on hold to sense the surrounding area, noticing that 2 highly identifiable key signatures were no longer present as well. "Goku and Vegeta have vanished too. I can't seem to track their presences anymore," Piccolo grunted informingly. Eyes narrowed with a glare of immense suspicion. Dend and Mr. Popo gaped at each other in surprise, wondering what could happen as a result of the Saiyan duo's unprecedented absence. "What can we do then?" The Dragon Balls were our only way to bring them back. Dend gravely pondered, stroking his chin in deep puzzlement. Piccolo sighed irritably and crossed his pink-shelled arms, giving Earth's guardian a passive side glance. Nothing for now. We either use the Namekian Dragon Balls, wait for Goku and Vegeta to find a way back themselves, or something else you really don't want to resort to. Piccolo suggested matter-of-factly in hopes of practicing the latter two options. Dend raised a non-existent eyebrow as he propped himself up with his wooden staff. What's that, Piccolo? Dend hesitantly inquired in piqued curiosity. Piccolo clenched his fanged teeth in what seemed like nervousness as he uttered one single name that brought fear to even the strongest of warriors. Beerus. Piccolo weightily whispered, marching back to his prior position on the lookout without another word. Dend and Mr. Popo understood exactly what he meant, their uniquely colored faces paling into a ghost-like white. If Beerus found out about Goku and Vegeta's unusual disappearance, nothing would be spared from the destructive force his anger may bring. Not even Bulma's cooking. Above Lake Verity, after Giratina's portal quickly spit them out before fading away, Goku and the unconscious Vegeta plummeted towards a small body of water surrounded by various trees. Due to the still prominent regression of his current body structure, Goku was unable to regain control of his building momentum and crashed straight into said lake in a gigantic splash. The resulting implosion of fresh water startled dozens of Pokémon both swimming and running about in the small patches of grass nearby, including a wide array of frightened starly that sporadically flew out of their nests. They were bird-like creatures with black-white feathers and a grayish-brown body, paired nicely with an orange beak and 2 feet of the same color. While Bidoofs and submerged Psyducks curiously observed the slowly drowning Saiyans, 2 glowing blue eyes filled with immense psychic energy materialized from within a proximate cave's entrance. Mies, pondered the surprised entity as it cautiously levitated outside of its personal resting place. The mysterious being was a gray fairy that had 4 droopy appendages magenta in color and 2 leaf-shaped tails curving upward from behind. A red gemstone was positioned in the center of its forehead while 2 smaller ones resided on each tail. This was Mesprit, a legendary Pokémon representative of all emotion. The psychic-type member of the infamous Lake Trio rubbed the sleep out of its golden irises and levitated closer to inspect the 2 perpetrators responsible for interrupting its prior slumber. Goku, his face strained from a mix of exhaustion and soreness due to the unexpected descent, particularly caught Mesprit's interest. Amused by the uproarious levels of power hidden within both Vegeta and Goku, the pink-faced imp giggled mischievously and decided to put its psychokinetic abilities to good use. Mesprit chanted lowly, outstretching its stubby arms in preparation to use the move, Confusion. In response, a dark blue aura was projected around both Universe 7 denizens as the eponymous emotion Pokémon safely lifted them up from Lake Verity's lowest depths. Much to the lower-leveled pocket monster's ever-watchful amazement, Mesprit safely placed Goku and Vegeta onto the closest shoreline. No longer faced with the danger of breathing in excess amounts of water, the 2 Saiyans calmly snoozed away in obliviousness of what just took place. Mesprit moved closer to Goku's snoring visage and touched his forehead to get a better read on his emotional state. Mesprit was pleased to see that the Z-Fighter's massive pools of energy were seemingly reliant upon his emotions, especially anger. Mesprit snickered amusingly, already expecting a lot of fun to come about from Goku's sudden presence. It danced buoyantly around his head in waiting for the intriguing boy to wake up while a suspicious-looking man with spiky blue hair watched from a distance. His emotionless blue eyes darted from the portal's initial placement back to Vegeta and Goku's knocked-out forms. Interesting, the strange man whispered monotonously in what could be misinterpreted as boredom. Arms crossed around his back, he approached Goku, Vegeta, and the blissfully unaware legendary with questionable intentions. Twinleaf Town was very small by even the lowest standards of miscellaneous villages. It mostly consisted of 4 wooden houses that each had green roofs varying in size and were surrounded by walls of trees. One such facility was home to a bubbly, highly determined 13-year-old girl named Dawn Berlitz. She had long, grayish-black hair with eyes of the same color, wearing a pink nightgown tied together by red string. Dawn contentedly rested in her queen-sized bed, dreaming of a moment she was particularly anticipating for years on end: the day she would become a licensed Pokémon trainer and be able to explore the Sinnoh region. As she theoretically sawed logs, a cat with gray fur and a spring-shaped tail gracefully tiptoed up the stairs leading to her room. The feline leapt on top of Dawn's windowsill and used its elegant paws to open it up, allowing sunlight to directly shine down onto the only child of her owner. After the successful execution of this firm wake-up call, Dawn blinked her eyes once or twice and exhaustively rose out of bed. "Ooh-ah. Thanks, Glameow." Dawn yawned in approval as she stretched her arms skyward in preparation to get ready. Her eyes were squinted from lack of proper sleep, but immediately widened in excitement from recognizing what the exact time of day it was. Oh boy, today's the day," Dawn frantically cheered to herself, tightly hugging a misfortunate Glameow to her chest. After sparing the catty Pokémon from prolonged suffocation at the last second, the amped-up young girl set the family pet down and scrambled through her closet for something to wear. She disposed of her pajamas and replaced them with a red jacket lined with 4 pink circular designs near the waist area. Dawn then concealed her bare feet with white tube socks and a pair of bubblegum pink rain boots, also taking her time to braid both sides of her slate-colored hair with 2 matching braids that were ovalish in shape. Last but not least, she placed a trademark white beanie atop of her head that sported a pink semicircular design reminiscent of a Pokeball. Dawn then looked into the mirror attached to her closet door and raised up a clenched fist of determination. "Watch out, world. It's Dawn Berlitz, time to shine," Dawn chirped to herself with a confident smirk and narrow of her black irises. Glameow rolled her eyes at Dawn's self-inflicted confidence boost and decided to walk back downstairs for some much-needed breakfast. Also wanting to eat before visiting Professor Rowan's lab in Sandgem Town, Dawn skipped along the steps in followed-up succession. "Morning, sweetie. I see Glameow was able to wake you up just fine." Johanna Berlitz, Dawn's mother, happily greeted as she cooked pancakes on the stove. She was practically the splitting image of her daughter except for the fact that she had a full head of dark blue hair instead of black-gray like Dawn's. She also wore a white long-sleeved shirt and an orange-red apron that covered her light blue jeans. In the middle of talking, Johanna poured a fresh bowl of Pokémon food for Glameow and another member of her team known as Umbreon, a black dog-like animal with pointed ears and a bushy tail that all had yellow rings wrapped around them. She also had slit red eyes and a yellow ring imprinted above her minuscule nose. The 2 Pokémon enthusiastically accepted the offer and wolfed down the pile of brown pellets down to their heart's content, mewing in content. As per usual, Dawn grumbled in response, taking a seat at the kitchen table. Johanna, just about done with preparing their respective meals, turned around to take a good look at her steadily maturing daughter. She squealed enthusiastically and clasped 2 hands over her chest much to Dawn's embarrassment. You look so cute. I can't believe my little girl's growing up so fast." Johanna beamed in a closed-eye smile, melancholically wiping away a few stray tears. Dawn's cheeks flushed from aggravation, shyly covering her reddened face via pushing her hat down. "Stop it, Mom. I'm not that old," Dawn whined childishly in growing protest. Johanna laughed at seeing her daughter in such a flustered state and apologetically set down a plate for Dawn to eat from. At the sight of bacon, sausage, and syrup covered, Dawn's prior chagrin was swiftly replaced with one of hungered euphoria. "I know, honey. It's just going to take some time for me to get used to you being on your own. That's all." Johanna elaborated in a bittersweet tone, placing a hand on her cheek as she reminisced about the past. Engulfing delicacy after delicacy in rapid succession. Dawn takes note of her mom's sadness and grimaces in understanding. Glameow and Umbreon also catch sight of their trainer's emotional instability, ears drooped in a somewhat sympathetic light. "Oh, I almost forgot. I bought you something on my trip to the Pokemart yesterday," Johanna proclaimed excitedly with a snap of her fingers, rushing over to her own closet. Dawn raised an eyebrow, but kept her own anticipation in check until she had a better idea of what was being given to her. Johanna came back with a strapped handbag that was white in color with pink stripes along the zipper. 4 pockets were included on each side for extra space-related purposes. "Ta-da! It's a new bag for your journey," the former Pokémon coordinator merrily revealed, encouraging Dawn to try it on. Dawn, her eyes sparkling with immense gratitude, got out of her seat and snatched the purse from her mom's hands. She then slipped its strap over her shoulder and twirled around for further inspection, smiling broadly the whole time. "It's perfect, thanks, Mom," Dawn beamed enthusiastically, giving her mom a great bear hug. Johanna wholeheartedly reciprocated the gesture and held Dawn close to her for just a short while. "You're welcome, dear, just make sure to come back." Johanna's worrisome request was interrupted by both the sound of a massive explosion and the rapid shaking of their home. Dawn fell bottom first onto the cold, hard floor while Johanna used the table as a makeshift source of support. After a few seconds, the rumbling dissipated as if absolutely nothing happened at all. In the corner, Glameow and Umbreon shivered uncontrollably in sheer terror while Dawn struggled to stand up on her own 2 feet. Mom, what was that?" Dawn stuttered nervously. Her blackish-gray orbs shrunken in puzzlement as she observed the house for any noticeable damages. "I'm not sure. I think it might have come from the woods somewhere," Johanna presumed shakily, brushing down her wrinkled clothes. Suddenly, a rapid series of loud knocking came from the front door. This was not expected by the 2 Berlitzes in the slightest. "Gya! Oh, it's just someone at the door," Johanna girlishly screeched in highly exaggerated horror before deadpanning from realized embarrassment. Dawn, having a feeling she knew who it was from the hyperactive slams, sighed irritably and attempted to answer the door. "I'll get it." Dawn groaned in still prevalent hesitance and slowly grasped the doorknob to open it. Standing there, as anticipated, was Barry, Dawn's next-door neighbor and closest childhood friend. He had disheveled blonde hair and widened orange eyes filled with limitless exuberance, wearing a long-sleeved shirt with orange-white stripes. He also wore black pants and brown tennis shoes, along with having a green scarf wrapped around his neck. Barry was currently jumping in place from an innate eagerness to talk about the explosion that transpired only seconds ago. "Sup, Dawn? Did you hear that trembling? It was scary but kind of cool at the same time. Want to go check it out?" Barry speedily greeted in growing impatience, not even taking a break to breathe in between each sentence. Dawn blinked a few times, desperately trying to comprehend the information Barry's habitual fast-talking entailed. Whoa, slow down, Barry. You're gonna give me a migraine," Dawn comically protested, waving both of her hands in front of the highly energized 13-year-old. Barry followed Dawn's careful instructions and inhaled a resigned breath of fresh air. He then halted his incessant hopping and stood up straight in a more relaxed position. Sorry. But, again, do you want to go see where all that ruckus came from? It would be an awesome way to start both of our adventures," Barry suggested anticipatedly, showing off a big toothy grin of pure hype. Dawn grinned the same way, but decided to make a formal farewell to her mom first before taking off. "All right, Mom. I guess this is it," Dawn announced in slight reluctance, timidly playing with the white scarf wrapped around her neck. Johanna, Understanding that it was finally time for her daughter to grow up, tightly embraced Dawn one last time and kissed her on the cheek. Dawn contentedly closed her eyes to enjoy the comforting moment. "Good luck, sweetheart. I know you'll make me proud in whatever field you decide to go into. Whether that be battling, like your father, or coordinating, like me," Johanna lovingly exclaimed with the utmost confidence in Dawn's promising affinity for Pokémon. Glameow and Umbreon both rubbed themselves along Dawn's boots as their own form of temporary farewell, the latter purring affectionately. "I will. Love you, Mom," Dawn whispered promisingly as she stroked the fur on top of Glameow and Umbreon's heads. She adjusted her bag on the side of her hip and walked back to where Barry awkwardly stood, trying his best not to intrude on Dawn's familial affairs. "Love you more. Be safe you too," Johanna chimed gleefully, waving the two friends off as Dawn closed the door. As Barry foolishly sprinted headfirst into the tall grass, Dawn took one last glimpse at the house she was raised in. She frowned ever so slightly in recollection of her happiest moments, but then smirked hopefully for what the future might hold. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll make something great of myself. I promise," Dawn mentally assured, intending to excel in both categories Johanna listed. She then jogged along Twinleaf Town's center pathway and tried to catch up with the overly eager Barry. "Hurry up, Slowpoke. We need to get to Verity Lakefront and see what happened. Who knows? It could have been a legendary Pokémon," Barry stated in galvanization, picking up the pace of his run as he reached Route 201. However, just as he was about to turn left, Barry failed to pay attention to what was in front of him and accidentally collided with an individual coming from the opposite direction. "Oof. Hey, what's the big idea? I should fine you 10 million Pokédollars for..." Barry's frustrated complaints were silenced upon immediate recognition of the person he inadvertently crashed into. It was an elderly man with spiked white hair and pronounced mutton chops of the same complexion. He wore a light blue vest with white sleeves, a brown tie, and black dress pants. His mouth was covered by a bushy mustache as he glared down at Barry in what could be interpreted as an angry scowl. Professor Rowan," the newly caught-up Dawn gasped in admiration at the man she and Barry have planned to meet for most of their young lives. His stern black eyes darted from Barry to Dawn in curiosity. "What do you kids think you're doing?" Professor Rowan scolded matter-of-factly. Barry quickly picked himself up from the grass and scratched the back of his blonde hair nervously. "Oh well, sir, me and my friend, Dawn, here we're going to see what the cause of that intense shaking was. Our homes almost collapsed because of it," Barry revealed anxiously, discomforted from being in the presence of such a respectable figure. "But did you realize that Lake Verity contains many patches of tall grass like the ones behind me? Meaning, you would be defenseless against hostile Pokémon that could jump out at a moment's notice," Rowan informed critically, gesturing to the various Bidoof and Starly waddling through hidden grassland. "That wouldn't bother us since we both love Pokémon equally. Honestly, we kind of hoped you would accept us as trainers at your lab. If we didn't run into you right now at least," Dawn continued passionately, trying to prove to the 60-year-old Pokémon professor that her and Barry were dedicated enough to receive such an important task. Rowan closed his eyes in puzzlement, mentally deciding on what he should do with the ambitious duo. "The two of you care deeply about Pokémon, Rowan pondered thoughtfully, raising a single hairy eyebrow at Dawn and Barry. "Yes. My family's livelihood has been reliant on Pokémon and I plan to do the same no matter what," Dawn remarked in acknowledgement of her primarily Pokémon-centric heritage. "Same with me. You can ask 100 times, but the answer will never change," Barry beamed in unquestionable sincerity, thinking back to his father's own position as a member of Sinnoh's very own battle frontier. Satisfied with the two kids' immediate answers, Rowan nodded his head appreciatively and pointed a finger towards the short walkway leading to Lake Verity. "Since we're going to the same place, I'll personally escort you two to the lake's shoreline." Then, you'll be entrusted with your own Pokémon. How does that sound? Rowan offered in a much more light-hearted tone whilst smiling lightly. Dawn and Barry looked at each other in wide-eyed surprise, theoretically doing somersaults within their subconscious minds. Great! Dawn and Barry whooped in unison, lining up single file behind the aging scientist. Rowan chuckled at their childlike exhilaration and led them to a short entryway that was constructed in between 4 green trees. Walking in, the three were shocked to see 2 unconscious teenagers being simultaneously observed by Mesprit and a strange man wearing a specially designed gray-black uniform of some sort. Is that a legendary? Dawn thought intriguingly, hearing legends of Lake Verity's proposed guardian ever since she was a little girl. As the psychic-type imp continued to prance around Goku's head near a patch of melting snow, the blue-haired stranger pondered the otherworldly origins of both Saiyan warriors. Throughout the expanding reaches of time and space, I have always theorized that alternate worlds parallel to this one existed somehow. These very beings definitively prove that idea to be true. The eccentric man proposed dully, a conniving sneer beginning to form on his flat lips as he analyzed Goku and Vegeta's lifeless forms. Professor Rowan squinted his tired eyes in suspicion while Barry leaned over to Dawn's shoulder. "What's going on?" Barry whispered confusedly. Dawn just shrugged her shoulders and proceeded to eavesdrop on the oddly hair-colored individual. Could their presences be a sign for me to take action? If the legendary Pokémon of the lake bed is interested in one of them, then I, Cyrus, will use them to my advantage. Then, someday, this world and all others like it will be mine to control. Theirs included. The recently introduced Cyrus affirmed sinisterly in a vague summarization of his future plans. Glaring one last time at the distracted Mesprit, Cyrus marched almost robotically towards Lake Verity's exit. "Who are you? What business do you have here?" An angry Professor Rowan interrogated Cyrus, standing protectively in front of Dawn and Barry. Cyrus barely even acknowledged Professor Rowan's presence and blankly stared at the old man as if he was a minor annoyance. Practically standing face to face, Rowan noticed a stylized G on the left side of Cyrus's gray jacket. "Allow me to pass. Step aside," Cyrus lowly commanded the trio of Pokémon enthusiasts. The utter lifelessness in Cyrus's eyes startled Professor Rowan to a degree where he had no choice but to follow the 27-year-old man's orders. He stepped backward and allowed Cyrus to make a swift exit, disappearing to parts unknown. Dawn and Barry peered over Professor Rowan's shoulders, gulping prominent lumps in their throats. "Geez, that guy gave me the creeps." What was his problem? Barry asked in instinctual befuddlement, already predicting that Cyrus's blank gaze would haunt his nightmares for the next few days. Dawn caught sight of Professor Rowan's troubled expression and attentively tugged on his sleeve. "Do you know who that is, Professor?" Dawn wondered aloud in her own sense of uncertainty. Professor Rowan shook himself out of his cautious stupor and continued to glower at Cyrus's retreating form. "I'm not certain. All I can say is that this won't be the last we see of him," Professor Rowan cryptically assumed, wanting to research the meaning of that G insignia as soon as possible. Dawn slowly nodded in comprehension and directed her attention back to Goku, Vegeta, and Mesprit. In that moment, Goku's eyes immediately opened and he jumped onto his feet in perplexement. His sudden awakening almost caught Mesprit off guard if it weren't for the pink-haired sprite's ability to turn invisible. Instead of being annoyed, Lake Verity's most prevalent inhabitant cutely cheered in response to Goku's healthy return. Where am?" Goku, noticing the higher pitch of his voice, placed both hands over his mouth in unprecedented shock. This action allowed him to inspect his much smaller palms and less muscular arms, confusing the Saiyan martial artist to no end. Goku's bafflement over his anatomical enhancements incited a fit of mischievous giggles in Mesprit, throwing Dawn, Barry, and Professor Rowan through a loop. "Gah! I am a kid again. Goku shrieked disparagingly, clutching both sides of his spiky black hair. As he began to panic, Don and Barry analyzed Goku's appearance in appalled disbelief. Fortunately, the effects of Emperor Pilaf's wish magically shifted Goku's orange gi into one that would fit his much shorter body, so he wasn't completely naked. Again? What does that mean? Dawn mumbled inaudibly, one of her black eyebrows raised in utter confoundment. I'm more concerned with his hairstyle. Is it like that naturally? Barry whispered analytically, touching his own head of blonde hair for emphasis. Professor Rowan, on the other hand, was amazed by Mespred's friendly behavior around the black-haired boy, since it was widely known to act quite reserved and hostile when around human beings. Vegeta! Wake up! Bud! Goku shook the Saiyan prince's limp body in a desperate attempt to get him awake during this urgent situation. Mespred, wanting to help out some more, projected a wave of psychic energy that hit Vegeta directly in the forehead. Due to being a practitioner of all emotions, this helped alleviate Vegeta's unconscious slumber. Sensing the impulse of psionic power, Goku jolted his head upward to address Mespred's smiling visage. Mespri! The emotioned Pokémon cried joyously. Its golden irises closed as it waved at Goku with one of its gray nubs. Goku, never seen a creature like Mespred in his entire life, waved and smiled back in an admittedly more strained way. Thanks for the help, Mespred. Goku unsurely gratified the 481st Pokémon. Upon hearing its name, Mespred pleasantly twirled around Goku's head in rarely seen happiness before vanishing into thin air. This astonished Professor Rowan even more, along with Don and Barry as well. This boy, he may hold all sorts of hidden potential, Professor Rowan presumed thoughtfully, never seeing any trainer that could win the favor of a legendary Pokémon without trying to do so. Meanwhile, Vegeta grunted painfully and propped himself up from the nearby pile of snow. The first thing he saw was Goku's goofy, sympathetic grin. Kakarot, why are you looking at me like that? Vegeta groaned vexingly, rubbing his ringing forehead with a gloved hand. His own eyes shrunk when speaking, reacting similarly to how Goku did. Okay, Vegeta. Whatever you do, don't freak out. Goku pleaded in a fruitless attempt to calm his greatest rival's building anger. Said son of King Vegeta looked at his stubbier appearance and shrunken down suit of armor in absolute lividness, his entire body surrounded by white flames of unstable ki. That miserable little sack of shit actually did it. He turned the Prince of all Saiyans into a prepubescent rugrat. Vegeta roared furiously, his massive ki exploding outward in the form of a pulsating gust of wind. This emotional tantrum almost knocked Don, Barry, and Professor Rowan off of their feet, causing them to huddle close together for added weight. That surge of power, are those two Aura Guardians? Professor Rowan gaped in possible recognition of Goku and Vegeta's formidable skills. Vegeta, calm down. Complaining isn't going to solve anything, Goku yelled objectively while displaying his own aura to cancel out Vegeta's. What do you expect me to do, Kakarot? First, that Pilaf or whatever his name is does this to us, and then that demonic dragon transports us here. Wherever here is anyways. Vegeta snapped back irritably, holding his hand out to address the overly cutesy Bidoof, Starly, and Psyduck trying to step closer. Goku clasped Vegeta's shoulder understandably, an action which the prince scoffed at. I'm not happy with this either, Vegeta, but we have a lot more serious issues to worry about. Like the Dragon Balls and Pilaf gang being somewhere else. Goku reminded him factually, pointing to the currently busted Dragon Radar as another problem to solve. Vegeta glanced at Goku for a moment and then slapped his hand away, crossing his arms in begrudging acceptance. Fine, but when I get my hands on that blue midget, his head will be a prominent splat on my boot. Vegeta growled darkly, slamming his right foot on the ground for good measure. Goku was about to scold Vegeta again for his ruthlessness, but stopped after taking notice of the three watchful pedestrians. Demonic dragon? Did these boys encounter Giratina? Rowan exclaimed skittishly, wanting to learn more about these kids. More and more by the second. He took it upon himself to approach the Saiyan duo while the two would-be Pokémon trainers stood a few feet behind him. "Hello, my name is Professor Rowan. What are yours?" Rowan politely introduced himself while Dawn and Barry waited for their own chances to greet the two anomalies. Goku bowed in respect for the elderly man standing before him while Vegeta dismissively harumphed with a narrow of his black eyes. "Hi, the name's Son Goku and this is my friend, Vegeta. Could you tell us where we are?" Goku beamed innocently, scratching his head a few times to show that he had no clue as to what is going on. Dawn, Barry, and Professor Rowan ogled the two Saiyan children, funnily, at least expecting them to originate from some region in the Pokémon world. Little did they know, the answer was whole lot more complicated than the three of them could possibly imagine.